I'll be in Vegas in 4 days, so what better way to send myself out than rewatching The Hangover. The Hangover's movie debut back in 2009 instantly solidified its legendary status. It arrived out of nowhere and quickly became a great success. Both viewers and critics lauded it. It quickly became the highest grossing R-rated comedy of all time, but Ted and later Deadpool surpassed it. Even for Hollywood's greatest commercially successful exports, the landscape of cinema comedy wasn't entirely bleak in 2009, but Judd Apatow's legacy recently delivered us Superbad and Forgetting Sarah Marshall, both of which astonished everyone by delivering a surprising amount of punch for their stature. Todd Phillips aimed to elevate the stakes despite the fact that a revolution was not required. Because the directors of Road Trip and Old School were involved, this was bound to go one way. The concept was simple. 4 guys go to Vegas for a stag weekend and misplace a stag somewhere along the way. But what's the catch? What happens that evening is never revealed. They're having their first drinks of an evening when the next day emerges out of nowhere. Someone has lost a tooth, a tiger has set up camp in the bathroom, and a chicken is roaming about their hotel room. One of them inadvertently married.
He is wearing my grandmother's Holocaust ring?
I didn't know they give out rings at the Holocaust.
Individuals with firearms are threatening them over an event that may or may not have occurred, and a mysterious baby has been placed in one of the cupboards to top it all off. The entire point of the film is to observe the 3 surviving guys as they look for their friend before his wedding, despite having no idea where they were the night before, despite having the same stupid, foolish humour as films like Superbad. The main joke in the movie is that they are grown individuals who put themselves in this situation. Stu, a dentist who has a long-term partner, and one could say an abusive relationship, he's never able to do anything he wants to do without her consent.
Rogaine, check.
And don't forget to use it. I can totally tell when you forget your hair just looks thinner.
The fact that he's even allowed on the trip is a miracle. On the other end of the spectrum is Phil, a happily married father with children, but whose fun days are behind him. He just needs one last blowout with the guys. My brother can currently relate. I expect him to turn into Phil this time around in Vegas. Nonetheless, they're here, striving to make up the 12 hours they've lost, despite the fact that they both should know better. One outstanding performance elevates the film to new heights, as it does in most brilliant comedies, as Alan, Zach Galifianakis, receives his first important cinematic role. Despite previous success in TV comedy and minor cinema roles,
I read online that you're very private and decline to answer questions that make you feel uncomfortable. This is a 2-parter. Is that true? And how old were you when you got your first period? If you didn't have an accent, do you think people would be able to tell that you're not a very good actor?
Yeah, no, I think my accent probably does help. That's true.
No shit, Sherlock.
Galifianakis' main breakthrough came at the age of 40 with The Hangover. Alan is the character who, due to his lack of social skills and deep need to be loved and appreciated, is able to turn a situation on its head and communicate precisely what it is on his mind without any sort of filter. Alan is the star of The Hangover, with a fondness for not wearing trousers and a bizarre sense of humour. To be honest, they wouldn't have had a hangover without him. The man behind the strange appearance and unusual lines is actually pretty insecure and badly wants to be accepted by his new brother-in-law's closest friends. Galifianakis is able to add dimension to his identity by wearing his wide fronts and allowing himself to be tasered by a teenager while wearing his wide fronts. As the sleazy high school teacher Phil, who intends to spend the funds that he garnered from his kids for a trip to Las Vegas casino, Oscar nominee Bradley Cooper portrays the character in other moments with great self-confidence.
Hey, Mr. Winnick.
The weekend, Bud Nick. I don't know you. You do not exist.
Cooper's performance effectively counterbalances Galifianakis, as does Ed Helms' portrayal of the beaten up and meek Stu. Obviously, Doug doesn't have many scenes in this movie, but when he does a wonderful job. In addition to Ken Jeong's Dick, which in hindsight was probably the first time I can recall seeing Ken on film. Him leaping out of the vehicle trunk while completely nude was unquestionably one of the most famous sequences in film history. It also includes Mike Tyson, which elevates any film to a level of art. The film, which centres around 3 unflinchingly broken people, looks to be made to appeal to the worst type of loutish stag-do mob. I had my stag party in Vegas back in 2018, and we couldn't even come close to the decadence these men displayed. We tried, believe me. Despite these imperfections, the audience finds itself pulling for their heroes, confident in the knowledge that, at the very least, our heroes aren't as ugly as the others around them. The first Hangover movie was once considered a comedic masterpiece, and I still stand by that claim. However, the film and its sequels appear to put a stop to the comedic blockbuster concept almost entirely, and similar films are now rarely seen in the current cinema. The Disaster Artist, Game Night, Blockers, Longshot, and Booksmart are notable outliners from the previous 5 years, but none have come close to suppressing The Hangover's success. While The Hangover isn't the only successful blockbuster comedy, fans also appreciated Phil Lord and Chris Miller's 21 and 22 Jump Street films. The blockbuster comedy, however, ended quietly with the end of the Hangover trilogy in 2013. It's difficult to pinpoint the exact cause of such a drop, considering comedies were thriving when the original film was released in 2007. Judd Apatow helped to build a market for these comedies by directing films such as 40-Year-Old Virgin, Knocked Up, Superbad, and Pineapple Express. This all well, however, quickly went dry as well. In a more emotionally sensitive Western social context, such frat boy comedies would simply be too hazardous for production companies to execute, with The Hangover in particular displaying a brash type of humour.
Paging Dr. Faggot! Dr. Faggot!
Even if such films are not forced to conform to such a sanitised sense of humour, the sheer fabric of the picture would need to be updated and modified to make it more acceptable for current tastes and attitudes or modern audiences. I mean, could you imagine films like There's Something About Mary or Kingpin being made in 2023?
So if I were you, I would start doing some tongue exercises before Friday.
Not a chance in hell. I guess the closest we've got in years is James Franco, Jonah Hill and Seth Rogen's outrageous movie This Is the End. And if you need any more proof that these films would never be created today, just Google The Hangover and you'll be confronted with pieces like these. The Hangover at 10, how the problematic comedy failed to stand the test of time. I bet the person who wrote that is real fun at parties. But in saying that, the one flaw in Hangover's humour I would say is a lack of female supporting characters are completely absent. Unfortunately, all the female characters in the film are presented as humorless, cunning and two-dimensional, similar to Knocked Up. There isn't much else outside of Heather Graham's portrayal of Jade, the hooker with a heart of gold figure. Except for her reportedly incredibly amusing nursing of her infant, she is not authorised to cause any laughing. While attitudes towards certain comedies undoubtedly played a role in the demise of the blockbuster comedy, the landscape of early 21st century comedy was very basic. Without the enormous canvas of humour that we now have, audiences were limited to the loudest voices in the room, whetting the appetites of an entire population. Now that we have so much variety at our fingertips, we can cater to every taste, well, almost every taste. And as a result, the whole concept of frat boy comedy has fallen by the wayside. The hit comedy now appears to be the bizarre relic of a long gone era. Despite never being meant to be sophisticated or nuanced, The Hangover became one of the most memorable movies of the late 2000s. The Hangover Part 2 and 3, on the other hand, did not fare as well. Part 3 focused on a stale and humorous kidnapping plot, whereas Part 2 was a carbon copy of the original. Watching The Hangover in 2023 is like a regretful, exhilarating voyage through the regrets of popular humour from the 2000s, and I for one hope this type of masterpiece comedy makes a resounding return in the near future, but I won't hold my breath. Right, time to pack my bags and head to Vegas with my wolf pack. Well, that's enough rambling for one day.
This is where Hangover happened, and this is where the cop car, they brought the cop car, and over there, where is it? I can't see it. Get out of the way, cow! There, that's a mattress. Hangover. Vegas, baby!